There's many reasons too, but there's also a note of caution here. It's easy to lose a lot of money. There's a bit of a joke in the industry when Silicon Valley or New York or one of these big wealthy community zip codes, the area code calls a rural agent. The agent's like, oh yes, here's another burned out tech worker or a Wall Street worker who wants to buy some land. Let's sell them the dream. But it's very easy to be taken advantage of. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can lose a lot of money. I know some people who have invested in land, and it was an emotional decision, and they lost a lot of money and didn't appreciate it. So can you tell us a bit about some of the not cautionary tales, but some active advice for someone that wants to go and buy some land, what to watch out for and the best way to do it?
Absolutely. So there is opacity or asymmetric information, right, when it comes to the market. Because what happens is mostly these tech workers, Wall Street workers, are essentially away from their home. They're going to Montana. They don't know the local regulation, so very much at disadvantage when they're working with their direct seller, with the agent. So part of the reason we're Terrascope and adding all this information is to enable the buyers to be more savvy and to make better decisions. So many people rely on their real estate agent as the single truth that can give all this really authoritative information about local demographic, relative pricing of the homes around, people are renting, how many people are owning. So that is one of the process you can make better decisions by collecting information. Cautionary tale is really happening a lot that I know. People are trading land stocks. I spoke to a land broker and interested in viewing a 200,000 in Northern Ontario to meet me there, right? So we can look at the boundaries, look at the vegetation. He's like, oh no, I never meet people. I go in Russia, in China, they just take a look at the picture because land is in no way a standardized or certified asset class. It's not like stock. You just so different.
If there will ever be a institutionalization or rather an automation and trading of real estate, land will be the last thing to be a tradable commodity. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's basically what we in structuring call the exotic class, right? The exotic asset class that's very bespoke, that requires a lot of due diligence. But it definitely blew my mind when people were trading land like stocks. And you know what? Making money. There's someone who applied 10 acres for $40,000 last year, and they sold it this year, right? They're so 50% good. But because we're in the up market, we're in a market like supply of inventory, so it's easy. At the same time,
are you saying that there are flippers coming into the market, people trying to get rich quick? It's causing unnecessary inflation in prices, and the core value that land provides is not being bought. It's more the greater fool theory, and this is happening in all asset classes. Bitcoin's an example, NFTs, stocks, real estate, you name it, right? But in land specifically, is that what you're saying?
So it is so the reason I said it's Northern Ontario is because it's not really inhabitable. It's extremely cold, and the land is not good for vegetation. So when you buy, that's tip number one. When you are searching in regions that are not traditionally used for residential or more frontier, be careful, because those land are mostly there are a lot of people trying to flip it. They're cheap, they're very easy to buy, and mostly because low valuation, there's more of a margin for huge growth when someone who don't really know what they're doing buy it, right? So that's the first thing. If you want to try to buy land that can appreciate, real estate is all about location. Even when it comes to rural, when you're not close to anything, location is still very, very important. So definitely buy something that's close to some basic infrastructure. And the reason I wanted to buy a farm is because farms are amazing because they are proven to be fertile. They have the necessary infrastructure to sustain vegetation, and also the neighborhood is set up in that way, right? So it's set up for people to live in, for people to cultivate. You definitely want, if you're new to rural real estate, you don't want to buy a barren plot of land out of nowhere for $100,000, even though it might sound like a good deal.
You know, I almost bought a plot of land myself with my co-founder Jack, right? And I think that land caught on fire when there were these great wildfires in California. And luckily we didn't buy the land, we didn't put it under contract, but whilst we were negotiating, there were all these fires. You just don't think of these things. There's a lot to think about when you buy land. You talked about one of the first things you do, which is you survey the land, you see the boundaries. This is land ultimately. You've got to understand every part of the land. You've got to know what you can do with the land too. You know, you're buying this land. Is it flat? Is it steep and rolly? And are there zoning restrictions? Are there things you can do? Another thing I found quite irritating with land I didn't appreciate is that often there are rights of way easements or access you have to provide and paths you have to maintain. And you think to yourself, well, this is my land, but you have to allow access either to the public or to government inspections or whatever. And then, and this is a really big one that people don't think about, right? Was the land formerly used to store old vehicles or farm chemicals or industrial chemicals or other toxins? In the real estate world, for example, in strip malls or retail, if there was previously a laundromat on site, you're often dealing with some crazy amounts of cleanup that you're legally liable to do. So you buy the strip mall, you think you're going to make money. There used to be a laundromat there, you don't really look into due diligence, and then you realize, wow, now that damage has been caused and regulations are changing, I'm on the hook to pay for that, and it could cost more than the building. You could go bankrupt if you're not very careful. And I'm only here talking about basic things. We're not even talking about construction and design, right? Like the types of soil, can you give access to construction equipment, and are there, how is rain going to affect your construction and development too? This plot of land that I wanted to buy, they stopped halfway through because there was a lot of rain for a while. And it just meant that, you would have had to redo a lot of the construction. And then all these roads needed to be paved, and it was just too costly, so they killed the project. And then there was this period of extreme drought, which, caused fire eventually. There's a lot to think about. How does one go in with their guard up here? Do they need a buyer's agent? Is there any way that people can avoid mistakes? Because there's a lot you don't know, and you're chasing a dream, and when you're emotional, you don't think about all these things. You really don't. Especially if it's your first time and you're doing it as an emotional decision.
Yeah. So the first thing is that people need to, like you said, be more rational. A lot of times when they see, $300,000 for a large farm, let's go into it.
Tell me, this is exactly how it starts, right? Isn't this not how it starts? Wow, it's so expensive, price per square feet in the neighborhood that we're in today, and we're using our life savings here to barely make rent or pay mortgages, and we live in a tiny 2-bedroom, 800 square foot apartment. But wow, we can buy acres and acres for the same price, and we can build a 5,000 square foot dream home. I mean, this is how it starts, right? The dream, the vision.
Exactly. So, I would say the information is very important. So, like I said, you are basically, in terms of information, at a disadvantage. And the important thing to overcome that disadvantage, first of all, is to have a framework of things you should think about. Right, the local regulation, how far apart the houses should be, the easement that goes across your property, and even localized climate change impact. Right, in California it's more dry. In Florida you're going to need to think about the water. So first of all, have a more systematic way to think about these issues. And like you said, check the previous owner. You can check that very easily with land registry. All of the information is out there and you can do it. But the important thing is to first of all, slow down, right? Don't be too charmed by the price tag yet. Don't lose your rational mind. And then going to authoritative data sources to check all of these things. And I think that's the benefit of having a specific search tool for rural properties. It's because urban property searches cannot give you all this information. That's not what they're focused on, right? So that's why rural property needs to be handled very differently. So a lot of people say, okay, Terrascope's in rural space, can it go to urban? I said, yeah, we can go to urban, but it's very difficult for urban searches to go to the rural space because of variables that get involved, right? It's basically rural buyers on average need to consider 3 times more variables than the urban buyer. So it's much more complex.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, and also it's your responsibility as a buyer to verify everything, and you can't trust what the agents say, especially if it's the seller's agent. And one way to get around it is to make your offer contingent. If there's something you want to do with the land, make your offer contingent on being allowed to do that. And if the seller isn't willing to agree, that's usually a red flag. I think this asset class is getting hyped up a lot. There was a time people were buying land on eBay, and now it seems like people are buying land abroad without even visiting. And people are just trading it as a commodity, when really I don't think it's an appropriate commodity to trade. There's too many variables involved. It's difficult. So you've got to be careful. And also, when you're dealing with any size transaction, something like this is difficult to litigate and very expensive to litigate. And so you're left holding the bag. And do you agree with this? If something's too good to be true, it usually is, in that if it's too cheap, there must be a reason, there must be something wrong with it. Is that a fair way of looking at it? Or do you think there are bargains to be had and there is a price arbitrage? Or do you feel like if something is very cheap, be very careful? Because by the way, just also, I know this is exactly what you guys do, or the problem you're solving. You go online and you sort by. I'm so cheap. I'm an Indian in terms of, my 23andMe DNA is 100% Indian. We're cheap people. We like bargains. Okay, I always sort everything by cheapest first, and I always get obsessed with metrics like price per square feet or per acre, and I look and I'm like, wow, this is so cheap. This is great. Is it worth paying more sometimes? And should you focus on price per acreage? And go back to my early question too. If it's very cheap, is there something wrong with it?
Yeah, I definitely think this is a spectrum, right? For rural property, you can buy. If you really want, potential upside, and you can do a lot of your homework, buy a vacant land and build your own home, and you potentially can save a lot of money, right? But I want to first address that there are homes that are very cheap and previously owned by people who live there, who made a happy life, and they're selling for one reason or another. So those are often a good signal, right? So you can definitely, first of all, rural properties are really much cheaper on average, so you can still get really good value in the rural space. But what you need to be careful with is venture into areas you really don't know anything about, right? If you never built a home before, if you always live in an apartment before, and it's probably too much of a first step to buy a vacant land and build everything that doesn't have utility, doesn't have water access, maybe not even internet, and to start everything from ground up. So that is not something we suggest for first-time buyers. But that being said, there are plenty of good properties that are residential, that have been in the family, in families in residential space for decades, that offer great value too.
Fantastic. How can people reach you if they want to work with you or contact you as we round up here?
Sure. So you can use our product. Our product currently live in California and Montana, and soon, very much next week, we're going to be going to Texas and a couple other states. Very quickly, we're going to cover all 50 states. You can use our product at Terrascope.io. You can also contact us anytime at hello@terrascope.io. And what's really exciting is that we're also starting a TikTok channel teaching people all the things we talk about today, about the tips of buying land, things you need to watch out for, how to check the water quality, how to think about septic system, right? People don't think about that often enough. So we're going to launch that very quickly, and once we do, it's going to be posted, the link will be posted on our website. So definitely stay tuned, and thank you very much for having me here today.